Hello and welcome to Opportunity Home San Antonio's Finance Committee meeting. A reminder before we begin, note that this meeting will be recorded in its entirety. As well, reminder to turn on your microphone and speak into it. The red light will turn on when the microphone is active. I will now begin Commissioner roll call. Committee Chair Dalia Contreras.
Present.
Board Chair Gabriel Lopez.
Here.
Board Vice Chair Gilbert Casillas.
Here.
Commissioner Estrellita Garcia Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Janet Garcia. Commissioner Leela Powell.
Here.
Commissioner Vincent Robinson. Doug Ponick, Board of Commissioners Attorney.
I'm here.
President and CEO Ed Hinojosa Jr.
I'm here.
We also have an interpreter located at the back of the room should you need their assistance. You may now call the meeting to order.
Calling the Finance Committee meeting November 15th, 2023 to order. The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consideration concerning attorney-client matters, real estate, litigation, personnel, and security matters. The Board of Committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of this meeting. Are there any citizens to be heard?
There are no individuals signed up to speak.
Thank you. We'll move on to discussion items. We have discussion item number 3, update and discussion regarding the quarterly finance report. Chief Finance Officer Diana Fiedler.
Hi, good afternoon. So before we begin, I know several of you are new, so I wanted to sort of go over the financial structure of the organization. Since I know that you had an onboarding, but I wasn't able to be there, so I wanted to make sure that I covered this piece for you. So there are over 215 operating business units within the organization. About 100 of them are operating properties within our public housing and Beacon portfolios. Then there are about another 60 that are either operating partnerships or general partners within a partnership. Then we've got numerous Section 8 programs, capital programs, capital grants, program grants, and then each administrative department operates its own budget within its own business unit. We then take those 215 business units and we sort of slice them and dice them into 7 different segments or lines of business. So there are 5 that are our core operating business. So there are the housing programs of Public Housing, Section 8, and Beacon. Then they are supported by resident services. And then there is the Central Office Cost Center, or the COCC, and that entity acts as the management agent for the federal programs. The management agent for the Beacon portfolio is embedded within the Beacon operation, that operating line of business. There are 2 lines of business that we sort of separate for you when we do our financial reporting, and they are real estate related. And because of the long-term nature of those types of transactions, they can skew your short-term operating numbers, right? So we separate those, and that is real estate services, and they are the folks who develop, and real estate tax credit development. So you've got a lot of developer fees that may be recorded but not collected. Then we have a very large capital grant, $16 million a year, that is a cost reimbursement grant that basically sits on your books until those capital projects are done. And at the end of the capital project, it gets transferred over to the public housing line of business, and then it gets closed out. So we show you those 2 things sort of separately, right? So we have operations and then capital. So we're going to start with our operating income statement. So this is the operations consolidated, and you can see that we ended the quarter with a loss of $3 million, which was about $3.3 million under budget. A large portion of this is related to the dwelling revenue for the Beacon properties. The public housing line of business also had a small variance there, only of about $300,000. But Beacon was off its budgeted projections by $2.8 million. About $800,000 of that is just related to timing. So we had 2 properties that were fully budgeted for full operations beginning July 1, which is the beginning of our fiscal year. That is the Mid-Crown property, which was not closed. The acquisition of that was not closed until 9/1. So you'll see the operations for Mid-Crown only being in here for 1 month. Then we also have a large property, 100 Labor, that is experiencing construction delays. So that particular property, which is over 200 units, there are only 75 units that are currently being leased. And so there's very little activity for that particular property shown on this quarterly report. The balance of the $2 million in tenant variances for tenant revenue variances for Beacon is related to two things. So we have occupancies that are significantly lower than projected for about 4 of our largest properties. I think that some of them are lower than 80%. We have one that's as low as 64%. The other thing that happened during the quarter was that the rent increases that were anticipated for the line of business were sort of budgeted for all 12 months as opposed to sort of being staggered in as leases come up. So some of this I don't think we will necessarily recover from by the end of the fiscal year. I assume that the Mid-Crown and 100 Labor will sort of catch up with itself before the end of the fiscal year, but some of the vacancies and some of the rental increases won't necessarily see a full recovery within 12 months. So then grants, there's about $1 million upside on grants, and those were for some Section 8 administrative fees, and then there was a better than expected increase in rents for our project-based rental assisted units in the Beacon portfolio. We have several of those contracts in place. HAP revenue is lower than budgeted, but the lease up is moving in the right direction, but sort of slower than anticipated. Operating expenses, salaries, and benefits are on budget today, but by the end of the year, we expect this to be over budget because once the classification and compensation study results came back, we were essentially already finished with the budget. So what we did was calculated the overage that we believed was going to happen before the end of the year, and we built that into the MTW request that we presented to the board along with the budget. So we expect that we will be over budget on salaries by the end of the year. But again, it was expected, it just, the timing didn't match up with the actual budget process. Of some concern and ongoing is the maintenance and operations being over budget of $2.6 million. That is largely in the public housing portfolio. There was a huge initiative in the first quarter of the year to lease up to 96%. They did make it, but there was quite a bit of money spent on trying to reduce the vacancies in public housing in the first quarter. So we're looking for a course correction there, hoping it's going to happen in the second quarter. We're going to be monitoring that very carefully, though. So the upside is that the units did get leased, but they did have to spend some money, some significant money to get them ready. Yes, sir.
Are the expenses related to turning over the apartments, or as it or the paying the landlords for renewals?
This is turning over the apartments. This is in public housing. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So then the HAP expense is below budget of $2.6 million, but again, their lease up is happening. It's just a little slower than expected. So I think by the end of the year, that's going to catch up as well, because these expenses are increasing for two reasons, not just lease up, but there's also increases based on the payment standards that you review on an annual basis. Yes, ma'am.
For the one that we don't expect to course correct over the course of quarter two or the year, which is a tenant revenue variance at
Yes.
Beacon, what's the solution to that in terms of where do we pull money? How do we capture that?
So hopefully what happens is that they can maintain their expense level at their revenue level. For some properties, for certain reasons, right, are just unable to. And you'll see when we get to a future slide that we've already been funding some of these properties with MTW funds, and that would continue to happen if necessary. there are a few $1 million that have been set aside for the Beacon properties for this purpose, but the hopes is that they would be able to maintain an expense level within their revenue level, right?
And in terms of, this might be an ignorant question, so I appreciate your your grace on it. How do we ensure that it's not a hope, right? Does Beacon, is this part of their financial conversation, knowing like, here's your position, here's what needs to happen on the expense side?
Yes.
Should you be unable to work within that, here's the process and protocol?
Yes. So Brandy and I talk on a daily basis about operations, and so Brandy set up some meetings so we could go more in depth with the directors of those two departments, Public Housing and Beacon. And there's also a group of analysts in the Operations Support Department that I think are going to be able to add a lot of value there and sort of tease out the areas where the directors can find improvements, right? So that's key to that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. So then for non-operating income here, the only variances are, well, there's a positive variance in interest income because we were able to extend our depository agreement with our local bank, and they offer a very good interest rate, so that's better than budget. And for other income, that is basically us drawing those $2 million, or basically us drawing $2 million to fund a couple of Beacon properties using MTW dollars. So,
Real quick question on the two properties that we approved recently for dispo. Are those expenses realized in these numbers yet, or?
no, those will simply go in as, well, no, not yet.
Okay.
But those would simply go in as transfers, so we wouldn't likely see them in here. They would, because of the way you have to do accounting, you have to eliminate any transactions that happen amongst yourselves.
Okay.
So you'd basically see it out in cash.
Okay.
Right. Right.
I got you.
So, okay, so this is our income statement for our capital activities, and you can see that we ended the quarter with a surplus of almost $6 million, and you can see how, with the numbers that large, how those numbers can, if we combine them with the operations, how they could skew your view of your financial view of the organization. So this is basically $1.2 million actually better than budget, and there were some additional capital funds and some additional developer fees recorded in the real estate line of business. And the developer fees, again, remember that they're recorded when they're earned, but they aren't necessarily collected in that same period, right? It could be 1, 2, 10, or 15 years down the road that we collect those actual fees.
Chair, I have a question regarding the operating budget, and it's on the overage on the ordinary maintenance and operations in order to meet the 96% lease-up goal. And this may be a difficult question to answer, but if some of that was related to maintenance that had been deferred and would need to be carried out anyway, are we going to see some future year savings, or were those charges that stemmed from having to do the work quickly, or change orders or things like that?
Okay, so I think that we're going to have to get into operations to discuss that. I don't think I have that information. I would think that, you want to?
You do it. Some of that is actually they are to turn the unit, so it's not really any of the deferred maintenance piece. But as we had reported previously, and the previous board was well aware of our shortage in staffing, and so we had a number of make-ready. Traditionally, we would outsource that, but our contractors couldn't even keep up with the demand as well. On the heels of that, we know that a lot of our contracts renewed, a lot of our costs went up too, so the team has actually done a recent comparison of what we were paying for 22 costs versus 23. And some vendors, we saw one vendor almost a 40% increase just in make-ready costs. So we're trying to do that. We still have a large number of make-readies that we do outsource because we just don't have the capacity to handle all of the work orders plus make-readies. And it varies by property.
So this is a three-year trend of consolidated revenue, and you can see that revenue went up by 4% with the greatest increase in grants revenue. And starting at the top, so that is in green, that's our miscellaneous revenue. And the 4.9 for fiscal year 22 was really more the outlier. That was a resyndication of a tax credit property that reached its 15-year compliance period, as opposed to bringing it into the Beacon portfolio. It was resyndicated, and so we had a pretty significant gain on that real estate transaction. In yellow is the HAP revenue, and that is up by $1.5 million, but that is that revenue was brought in again to supplement those two Beacon property operating losses. In red, that's grants. That is $2.6 million increase over 22. Those are for Section 8 administrative fees as well as CAP Fund. And CAP Fund, again, is simply a cost reimbursement grant, so the timing of that can be significantly different year over year, depending on what projects they're working on and how quickly that construction is going. In blue, that is tenant revenue, and that increase is essentially linked to the Beacon portfolio because of the new properties that were brought on between those two periods, which was the Mid-Crown and Ravello properties. The next slide is the same three-year trend, and this is for consolidated expenses. And expenses did increase by 25%, with the largest increase of 16%. So you could see that salaries and benefits increased $3.1 million, pretty significant. But remember that you guys have been hearing from, sorry, I have boys, I say you guys. You have been hearing from the HR department about vacancies over the last couple of years and how they've had difficult time filling positions. So there's been sort of a real aggressive push to hire folks. So part of this increase is related to actual staffing up, and the other part is related to the increase in salaries based on the class and comp study. In green, you'll see the increase in HAP expense, and that is essentially all good news because that is impacted by the actual ability for Section 8 to lease up some of their unused their unused vouchers. There's another component to that, which is the payment standard, and that's about half of that increase is for lease up, and the other half is due to the increase in payment standards. In yellow are other expenses, and that is a $1.2 million increase, and that's for consulting fees, relocation scholarships, just sort of like a sundry of expenses that are included in there. Utilities were essentially flat, and there you see the large increase, not necessarily the largest dollar, but it's the largest percentage increase, which is in ordinary maintenance and operations. Between 21 and 22, there's a 23% increase, and between 22 and 23, there is a 53% increase. And again, we're looking for a course correction there within the second and third quarters. But again, the good news is that they were able to lease up to the 96% level in the public housing portfolio.
The one thing to note on this slide that can be challenging on the expenses, I mean, revenue, we can pretty much forecast maybe there might be an uptick that might come from grants or something that we didn't know we were going to get. On the expenses, what's hard about this slide is it's comparison last year to this year without knowing, well, part of it was already accounted for in the budget process. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at budget to actual is a more accurate picture because we might have made an intentional increase in the budget through the budget process.
Perfect.
Like what you talked about in terms of the salary pieces, right?
Thank you.
So I just want to, for our own review of this, just kind of couching it in, there's a lot lost. It's great awareness on the expense side, but what'll be more helpful to look as a second thing for us is to make sure we're looking at budget to actual, because what's more important is we might have intentionally increased the expense on the budget side, and when you look at budget to actual, it doesn't have, it doesn't look like this.
Absolutely, that's great feedback, and thank you for that, because, right, also because of the economy, I mean, there's a lot of this that is just out of our control. Yes, thank you, we can make that change. So then this next slide shows our debt to equity ratio, right, which signifies our financial strength, right? So we decreased from 0.45 to 0.39 from year over year, and that was really just resulting from the increase in equity from operations, right? You can see there our debt, although we paid off some significant amount of debt during this period in the Beacon portfolio, we also picked up new affordable housing projects, which added additional debt. So this 0.39 is very strong. The lower the better. We always want to keep it below 1. So this next ratio shows our current ratio. There's been a significant decrease in this ratio from 3.62 to 2.31, but most of it is the result of a property, the Sendero property. Their mortgage debt is due within the next 12 months, and at that point, per accounting rules, right, we move that debt into a current liability. So it increased our current liability pretty significantly by about $7 million. But once that debt is paid off, the ratio will rebound to just over 3%. So it'll be really strong. It's still really strong at over 2%. I mean, so this is really good news as well. So these are our moving to work uses for the first quarter. Essentially, most of the money was used for development. So you can see there's some work on the Labor Street property and the Snowden project. And then the middle item of $1.8 million is that money that we use, that MTW money that we use to supplement the Beacon portfolio losses with. So then, those are the end of the slides, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the government shutdown. I think that we all know that there's a bill that's already voted on in the House, right, that maintains our funding level at 2023 levels, which is better news than I would have expected, but it's only until the middle of January, right? So we only have until January 19th, and that's if it makes it through the Senate and if the President signs it. So fingers crossed we will see that happen very soon. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up to you is that there is a cash report also that's included in your packet, and there is a decrease in cash that is related to somewhat to the operating losses, as well as so the beginning of our fiscal year, we, like most people, pay our annual insurance dues. Our insurance comes up on the first day of our fiscal year. So there are some significant insurance payments that go out, and there's also been some ongoing capital and development projects. So the construction at 100 Labor, we're still funding a portion of that. Snowden, we're funding a portion of that. And then there was some monies that went out for Bristol at Somerset as well project. And that's all I have for you today. There's also a grants report in there if you have any questions about that. We always include that for you as well.
Thank you so much.
And if not, I look forward to maybe we could put together a draft of a comparison report and maybe send it out to you.
That'd be great.
Your thoughts are? Good, thanks.
Absolutely. Are there any other questions? All right, we're moving on to item number 4, update and discussion regarding the quarterly internal audit report. Alison Schlegel, Director of Internal Audit.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So this is going to be the report for quarter 1 for fiscal year 23-24. So internal audit is continuing to work with CDI and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program on escrows. So In total for the quarter, we received 4 escrows of over $5,000 for a total of $31,553.52, and the average escrow was $7,888.38. The next slide. We had an audit of the assisted housing wait list eligibility and admissions process. This audit was on the 2022-2023 audit plan. That audit was finalized and distributed to the Board of Commissioners on August 3rd. The corrective action items that were recommended by internal audit, the plans that were provided by management to correct these action items should mitigate the risk of similar findings occurring in the future. The next item we have is the audit of the public housing repayment agreement. So this one was also on the 2022-2023 audit plan. This finalized on October 17th and was distributed to the Finance Committee. As a result, the corrective action item plans provided by management align with the recommendations from internal audit and will also mitigate the risk of similar findings in the future. The next one we have, we are in the process of completing the public housing waitlist eligibility and admissions process. This audit was kicked off on April 5th and fieldwork is underway. Internal audit is reviewing the waitlist process for the most current waitlist that was open July 2022, and will review the eligibility and admissions process through a sample of the February 2023 waitlist. So the sample size will be 10% of the waitlist, or a maximum of 45, and 45 new admissions and 10 denials.
Just a quick question on that. Do we currently have a wait list open or are anticipating?
Yes.
Do we have any ability to time the opening of the wait list so that we have information from prior audits, of performance audits, to impact process, or are we mandated on this schedule by HUD?
So right now they have the HCV waitlist open, and I can tell you that it pretty much goes into the assisted housing one, and the recommendations that internal audit provided for that audit have been mitigated. So they were the risks that we did see. I don't think that it should be an issue going forward.
Thank you.
Okay, the next one. So this one is the 2023-2024 audit plan. This was for the Beacon Communities Repayment Agreement. The audit was kicked off on September 18th. However, we decided to postpone this audit to allow for new procedures associated with Beacon Communities Repayment Agreements to take effect. So we are postponing that to 2024-2025. Any questions on that one?
I was trying to make the connection, pulling up the audit report that was shared with us in August, and one of them, there were 3 pieces kind of lifted up in the final report. One of them, the expected completion date was November 1st, and that was for the unmatched ledger balance, down payments, missing HUD requirement documents. Is that update in here?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure we connect the dots, because sometimes it's hard with the language.
Yes. Okay, the next slide. So we did kick off the audit of procurement. So this is going to be the oversight of vendor compliance for Section 3 and small minority and women-owned business enterprises. So we kicked that off on August the 28th. Fieldwork is underway, and we will be reviewing service contracts both executed and renewed between April 1st, 2023 through July 31st, 2023. Next slide. So for the compliance audits, we have the 3 different departments. We have assisted housing. So all files that were reviewed are all digital, and we've completed a total of 195 file reviews. For public housing, we did 10% of the occupied units with no less than 5 files per community reviewed. All files are physical, which means they have to physically go pick the files up. And then they've completed 12 public housing and mixed income properties for 110 files reviewed. And then Beacon Communities completed 9 Beacon Communities for 140 files reviewed for the quarter. And then the action items. So on the slide it says there are currently 8 open action items, but as of the date that the packet was published, we've closed one out, and it's the November 1st one. So that one has been completed. So there's only 7 now on the list. So 3 action items are pending review and approval of an SOP. 2 are pending the retraining of staff to ensure policies and procedures are followed. And then we have 1 that's pending the update of the pre-eligibility application to ensure the registered sex offender portion of the application is completed. And then the last one is the one that's pending the update of verification consent forms. And those are all on the list of correction items that we sent you. And we didn't have any third-party audits. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you. All right, that completes our discussion items. It is 1:36, and we will adjourn the Finance Committee meeting. Move on to the Real Estate and Operations.
Welcome to the Operations and Real Estate Committee for Opportunity Homes San Antonio. Do we need to do roll call? Okay. You may call the meeting to order.
Meeting is now called to order. The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The board or committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
We have 2 individuals signed up to speak. The first is Hallie Dunlap.
Hi, my name is Hallie Dunlap, and I'm a housing attorney with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid, and I'm here to talk to you guys about the resolution to extend the abatement period from 30 to 60 days. As a housing attorney, I primarily represent and defend people who are Section 8 voucher holders who are facing eviction. And with this abatement period, by moving it to 60 days, it's going to help prevent evictions, it's going to protect vouchers, and it's going to more equitably distribute the responsibility to the party that caused the apartment to final fail, which is the landlord. We are strictly speaking about instances where the landlord has failed to maintain the housing quality standards. So once someone's unit final fails, at the beginning of the next month starts the abatement period. And after that month is over, then the HAP contract terminates. So when someone's trying to move, they're going to submit paperwork to get a moving voucher. In practice, this usually takes, from start to finish, this usually takes around 30 days. So now that they've got the moving voucher, we're about at the time period that the rent payments from the housing authority are about to stop. And what this really boils down to is that it takes more than 30 to 45 days for a Section 8 renter to move. And so once they've got the moving voucher, then they need to go find a unit, which is in itself a major difficulty because, as we all know, there's a major shortage of affordable housing in San Antonio. They also need to come up with a roughly $500 for the deposit, which not every tenant is able to do within 30 days. Then they need to go get accepted, pass a background check. Then they need to get the landlord to complete the RTA with them, the request for tenancy approval. That process usually takes about 2 weeks in my experience. Then after that, assuming that everything was good, then the unit needs to pass an inspection, and that usually takes another week. So we are well past like the 30-day abatement period in most cases of what I see. And so for what this means is that the HAP contract is terminated, so the tenant is responsible for full market rate. And so this is where our organization comes in, because now this person is being sued for eviction for non-payment because their landlord failed to maintain the housing quality standards. Once that person is sued for eviction, it makes it even more difficult for them to relocate because now their rental history is damaged. And if they are to lose at the eviction hearing, it's mandatory grounds for the termination of their voucher. Again, because the landlord failed to maintain the housing quality standards. So my pitch really to the board is that the change for, the moving the period from 30 to 60 days is going to prevent evictions, it's going to protect vouchers, and it's going to more equitably distribute the responsibility to the landlord who allowed the unit to final fail. I also wanted just to add that, if San Antonio was to adopt this resolution, they're in line with some other major housing authorities in Texas. The housing authority in Houston has up to a 90-day abatement period. The housing authority in Austin has an up to 90-day period. And Dallas has 60 days. So I hope that you all consider passing this resolution. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Lisbeth Pata.
Hi, good afternoon. I am also an attorney with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid. My name is Lisbeth Barra. I work with Hallie, also on the housing team. I am born and raised in San Antonio. I'm here speaking in individual capacity, but just to speak about some of our experiences as housing attorneys in San Antonio, like Hallie mentioned, we see a lot of times when a landlord's and a tenant's HAP contract terminates because of a failure to meet the housing quality standards. Many times that just leads to a tenant facing eviction. And really that's unfortunate because it's not the tenant's fault that a unit has failed, in the majority of cases, inspections. And so it ends up being that even though it was sometimes the landlord's fault that the HAP contract terminated, the tenant ends up facing the consequences. So I also am here to speak in support of passing the proposed policy. Aside from also how Hallie mentioned, we've seen that this works in several other areas, such as Austin and Dallas and Houston, where there's also been a lower housing market availability. I think in addition to this helping the tenant move, it also relieves some of the administrative burden and takes away our focus in helping folks find housing in a shorter amount of period so that we can focus on their case and making sure that it goes forward and that they're not facing eviction. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
There are no other individuals signed up to speak.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to the individual items. Consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6405, authorizing the award of contracts for commercial real estate broker services to CBRE Incorporated and Jones Lang LaSalle Americas Incorporated for a period of 1 year with the option to renew up to 4 additional one-year terms. George Ayala, Director of Procurement. Miranda Castro, Director of Asset Management.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Today, I am here to talk to you about getting approval from the board to, from time to time, we come across the need to have commercial real estate services for various things that we're doing, such as developing, acquisitions, selling commercial space, vacant lands, things like that. And so we had put a solicitation together, and I will let George speak more about that specifically, requesting bids for that. We did get 2 entities that came back, Jones Lang LaSalle and CBRE.
Those are well-known national companies. It is our intention to award the contract to both of the applicants. Did you want to say anything, George?
So good afternoon, Commissioners. With regards to the solicitation process, we did issue out a solicitation on June 6th for commercial and real estate broker services, which closed on June 23rd. This RFP was published on multiple websites, directly solicited to 255 vendors, and at the conclusion, we did receive only 2 responses. This was evaluated on qualifications and experience, project approach, fee proposal, references, and the strength of the Section 3 and SWIMBY plan. As Miranda mentioned, we are recommending both companies to be awarded. As far as the financial impact, Opportunity Home will be required to pay a brokerage, the broker a percentage fee ranging from 5 to 6%, 0.05 to 6%, depending on the listing and on the type of property. This award includes the acquisition of sites suitable for affordable housing development and/or the acquisition of existing housing developments and marketing of commercial space owned by Opportunity Home.
Any questions? Okay. Do we have a motion to move it forward?
Prior to the vote taking place, I'm going to abstain from this vote.
Thank you.
I move that we bring the resolution forward, or the item forward.
I second.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you so much.
Item number 4, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6407, authorizing the award of contracts for mowing and grounds maintenance for Beacon Communities and to ANS Landscaping Services, HABE, VBE, Blue Legacy Landscape and Maintenance Company, HABE, Cutright, LLC, HABE, MBE, SBE, and Encircle Management Incorporated, ABE, DBE, SBE, WBE, for an annual cumulative amount not to exceed $1 million for a period of 1 year with the option to renew up to 4 additional 1-year terms. George Ayala, Director of Procurement, and Melissa Garza, Director of Beacon Communities.
Hello, good afternoon, Commissioners. We are coming today requesting approval for our mowing and landscaping contract. We are asking that all 4 vendors be approved to cover our 36 properties that we currently manage. What's really exciting to note about this new contract is that we have 2 new vendors that requested or put in their application for this. And so that's exciting because we're always looking to bring in new vendors into our portfolios. I will let George talk about the procurement part of it.
So with regards to the solicitation process, we did issue a solicitation on September 25th. This solicitation was for mowing and ground maintenance for the Beacon Communities only. This closed on October 16th of this year. We published this solicitation on multiple websites, and we did receive 90 vendors' responses. After the conclusion, we did receive a total of 6 vendors, which were evaluated on the qualifications and experience, proposed staff qualifications, the capacity, the project management and plan, price proposal, the strength of SWIMBY utilization statement. As you heard from Melissa, we are recommending the top 4 highest ranking vendors. With regards to the financial impact, the current award recommendation for mowing and ground maintenance services for Beacon Communities is not expected to exceed $1 million, which would include the mowing and ground maintenance services for all of Beacon Communities.
I do have one question. It seems like there's a fairly small margin between the 4th and 5th respondents?
Yes, ma'am.
And that mainly that's based on capacity of the vendor or qualifications of staff? And I was just wondering if we have any outreach or if we provide any technical assistance to vendors to let them know how they could qualify or improve their standing for the next opportunity?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We usually held quarterly meetings where we actually go out to the public and advertise our upcoming solicitations. This is kind of similar to the listing that we provide you on our reports. So we do make that available. We do participate in different community outreach events. For example, next month we're participating in the Bexar County Small Vendor Fair. So we do participate in those events. In those events, we do reach out to the community. We do provide feedback based on their scoring, and we do talk to them about how they can improve their chances of getting a contract with us, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any further questions? No further questions. I entertain a motion.
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 6, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6404, approving the Vista at Reed 9% low-income housing tax credit project, and approving and authorizing the San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to approve the Resolution 23 FAC-11-15, authorizing its participation
We can do this one and just go back.
Oh, I already did that one. Oh, I missed 5. I'm sorry.
Let me make sure.
Sorry. Item number 5. Consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6409, authorizing the award of contracts for pest control services for baking communities to Nova Pest Control Incorporated, AABE, ESBE, MBE, SBE, and Worldwide Pest Control, HABE, MBE, SBE, WBE, HUB, for an annual cumulative amount not to exceed $500,000 for a period of 1 year with the option to renew up to 1 year and 6 months. George Ayala, Director of Procurement, Melissa Garza, Director of Baking Communities.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So we are requesting approval for this contract. The two vendors that we're asking for approval, they are both new to Beacon. They do not service Beacon and have not, so they will be new to us as well. This service that we're requesting is to do routine services on a monthly basis where they'll go into our units and service them. It is also for any type of advanced services that we might need for any type of pest infestations. So we are requesting your approval to approve both vendors.
So with regards to the solicitation process, this solicitation was published on August 24th, and it did close on September 21st. It was published on multiple websites, directly solicited to 52 vendors, and at the conclusion, we did receive the 2 vendors that submitted a valid response. The evaluation criteria included was relevant experience, key personnel, the methodology, capacity, strength of the Section 3 and SWIMRI plans, and as Melissa stated, we are recommending both vendors to be awarded. Financial impact, the current award is not expected to exceed $500,000. Which would include, this award would include pest control services for the areas to include but not limited to the units, common areas within the developments, offices, laundry rooms, lobbies, dumpster areas, breezeways, halls, and pool houses. I just wanted to point out that one of the things that that this contract is for a period of 1 year with the option to renew for additional 6 months. The reason behind that is because we're running in concurrently with our current contract. So we do have another contract right now, so that's why you see that 1 + 6, just to make sure that they finish at the same time. Questions?
Any questions?
Have either of these, and I was looking at, have they been on contract with us before?
So both of these are new, worldwide, right?
So they're new to Beacon, but currently Worldwide does service public housing. I don't believe Nova does.
Right.
Joel? Nope. Okay. So Nova is completely new to us.
And I guess the reason for that is a follow-up, since we've had some comments or concerns with regards to, sometimes with certain units or just particular control issues with, rodents or, roaches or things like that. Is there things, they're aware of it, they understand our expectations.
Yes, sir.
Us up here don't want to have, we want to make sure that it's being handled.
Yes, sir. So it is part of our scope of work. So the RFP included a full scope of work of our requirements and what we expect of them. And so they are aware of what we're asking them to do. And there wasn't any questions that came back, which is always, I guess, a good thing or bad thing. But there was no questions as to exactly.
Okay.
Any other questions? There's no further questions. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion carries. It's been brought to my attention that there is a resident that is present that came in after citizens to be heard and hadn't signed in. Due to the rules of the state, you must sign in at the appropriate time. We don't want you to leave without being heard, but we cannot hear you at the dais. I'd like to ask Brandy and Joel to meet with you if you can stay after this meeting, and they will meet with you to see what your issue is, okay? Thank you. Now moving on to item 6. Consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6404, approving the Vista at Reed 9% low-income housing tax credit project, and approving and authorizing the San Antonio Housing Facility Corporation to approve the Resolution 23 FAC-11-15, authorizing its participation in the Vista at Reed transaction. Susan Ramos, Sossaman, Interim Director of Development Services and Neighborhood Revitalization.
Good afternoon. Today we are seeking approval for Resolution 6404 for final approval to move to closing. We are seeking authority to undertake the Vista at Reed project, which will be in partnership with Atlantic Pacific. The construction is projected to begin January 2024 and complete in March 2025. Please note that the board has previously approved resolutions in February of this year that allowed the project to apply for the 9% credits and other financing. As a reminder, this project is located on the northwest side of San Antonio, just north of 151, west of 410, and about 4 miles from SeaWorld. Located in the regional centers, if you see the map, we're very close to Medical Center and UTSA and not too far from the downtown area. The overview of the project, it is in Council District 6, Northside ISD. The proposed units range from 20% AMI to 60% AMI with 1 unit at fair market. We have the breakdown for bedrooms. It's 22 2 bedrooms and 34 3 bedrooms. Like I mentioned, it's 9% tax credits, and the overall development cost is approximately $21 million. And the approximate breakdown is shared on the next slide. So in summary, we're requesting approval to move forward with the Vista at Reed transaction. And the transactions do allow us to not only move towards closing, but also for Facility Corp to serve as the general partner, general contractor, and there's one more. Our role is general partner, general contractor, and to own the land. Questions?
I have a question, and I'm not sure if this was 4% or 9%, so there may be some education needed on my part. Have we fixed what needs to be in the agreements legally to ensure that after they reach the, 15-year mark, that they are still maintaining the property? And even 5 years before, just thinking about our last board meeting, when we were talking about an issue from 15 years ago. And we said, as we go forward and we are consider getting into these agreements, that we want to make sure, what I kept hearing was that legally we had no ability because of the agreements and there wasn't language. So I'm just wondering if we've fixed that, so when we do get into these agreements, there's more teeth.
Yes, thank you for the question. There are several things we're doing. We have had several meetings, asset management and finance, with our attorney to talk with them about how we could move forward in the future. We've also met, this week I met with the Housing Trust in the city and the Office of the Housing Officer to start talking about how we could collectively ask for the same thing so that it's not just us. And so that is a discussion we're having, and it was very favorable. And we have a scheduled follow-up meeting in January to talk about additional details about how that would work. This particular transaction, I think we started about a year and a little bit more ago. So it did not move forward with those particular parameters. And at this late stage, after everything is already approved, except for the land transaction, we're just moving to closing at this point. So this would be under the previous parameters.
Can we get a list of how many more of these are going to happen before we have something new in place, so that we can kind of think about that and do some future planning and forecasting?
Yes, that would be on the development list that we currently have, that we send, I think, to the main board meeting and maybe to operations as well. So everything on that list that was started previously, everything, yeah, would be under those terms.
So it's too late for any new amendments to be added to correct it?
To any of them?
Yeah. Once we set up the original terms with the developer, it's too late to change those. Now, the most recent deals we brought to the operations committee, there was one with Cohen Esri, I think, last month, and there was another on the South Pond, North Pond.
North Pond.
Over in the Victoria area. Those two, we have been specifically talking about requiring those, and we approached Cohen Esri about that before we accepted bringing that forward, so that is part of the agreement we have with them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'd also like to note that we are incorporating an MOU with this project, and we didn't do that in previous, and so we are including some language that are more favorable to our agency.
Do we have anyone from Atlantic Pacific here today?
No, we don't.
One additional question. I did notice this is in District 6. What's our policy on coordinating with council members when projects like this are coming to close?
So we do coordinate at the front end, and in order to get the 9% tax credits, we need the support of the council district. So all of that would have been done about a year ago or so.
It's part of the 9% application process.
I'm aware of the process. Sometimes there's a change of council person, or sometimes projects do get delayed. And so I was just wondering if we provide any update on the types of development activity that we're undertaking on a regular basis. I probably should be asking the GR folks this instead. Thanks.
We do provide updates when we meet with council about the projects and the status of the projects and things of that sort. And we do have regular meetings with the different city council offices. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item number 7, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6406 and 23 SEN-11-15, authorizing the payoff of debt up to $7.3 million, which may include MTW funds for legacy at Crown Meadows. Brandy Pettis, Chief Operating Officer.
So, good afternoon, Commissioners. This is a new item for Legacy. However, it's not a new item that we haven't presented in the past to our board. If some of y'all recall, probably earlier this year, we brought over several developments that we were looking to seek to use MTW funds for to pay off the debt. Legacy at Crown Meadows, the debt is due, and it's really a odd date. It actually is due January 1st, 2024. Which is not traditional. Usually they're not at the first of the month, but we are looking to pay the debt off with MTW funds up to $7.3 million. And what this allows us to do is once we pay off the debt and we use MTW funds, we do file a LORA on this property, and we keep these properties well past our time, over 30 years of 80% AMI affordability. And so we are, when we do that, we are continuing to keep these properties at 80% AMI or less. And it also allows us to meet our MTW obligations of substantially the same number of serving the same number of families. And so that is the request for us today, is to actually utilize MTW funds to pay the 7.3, and then we will be continuing to, we will move forward with the LORA, and then as well as be able to count some of those units that are not currently being subsidized through the Housing Choice Voucher, but if those families are 80% or below, we get to count them as our MTW, substantially the same number. We'll take any questions regarding that.
I do just have one comment, not so much a question, but I'm just familiar with past transactions, and I know that that we've moved more towards collaborating with the city and the city providing funding for Opportunity Home projects for redevelopment. I have heard of projects in the past in which the form of the LURA has been an issue for the city with the investment of federal dollars, such as home funds. So, and I'm sure you have a prescribed form that you have to use for your LURA, but I know that the city often has difficulty in terms of the exact number of units at AMI, even though it may cumulatively be the same if the breakdown is different, and that they've actually requested property owners to go back out and get signatories to reissue a LURA, which is practically impossible. So if there's any ability to coordinate up front with NHSD or other city departments to make sure that we're not precluding ourselves from accessing city dollars in the future on renovation of the property.
Thank you for that. We'll make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's for that. But we've gotten pretty comfortable with these LURAs. We've done probably well over 10 in the past year.
Oh, I don't think it's us. I think it's
the city.
Yeah.
Okay.
What? We're recorded, right?
It's all good.
And they're watching.
Exactly.
And they're watching.
And they usually watch. 192 units. What's the occupancy at this location? Just more FYI for me. Do you know?
I do not.
Good.
I can get you that in 5 minutes. I just don't have that answer right now.
Okay. Just thought I'd ask.
I know how many potential the local non-traditional would be about 167, which is good.
That.
So this one is I want to say this one does have a higher occupancy than some of our normal ones, but I don't have it offhand.
Okay. Good.
Any other questions? No questions? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy.
So it was less than 5 minutes. It's 96%.
Oh, well, look at that. Nice. Thank you.
Item number 8, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6401, approving interim policy updates to the administrative plan and admissions and continued occupancy policy, the ACOP. Christine Patrick, Assistant Director of Operations Support and Policy.
Good afternoon. I'm Christine Patrick, the Assistant Director over Policy in the Operations Support Department. And I'm going to be presenting some proposed changes to our policies in both the admissions and continued occupancy policy, which is the ACOP. It has all of the policies that govern our public housing program, and to the administrative plan, which has all of the policies that govern our voucher programs. Does this work? Okay. So the first change is going to be to the ACOP for public housing. We currently have a waitlist preference that we created in April of this year and have been using since then. We've gotten, I think, 90 referrals for this preference. And the way that the preference works, it's called the single family preference. And HUD's definition of single family is one individual. So we have this set up to have our partner, whoever we're partnering with, right now it's Haven for Hope. They are referring individuals who qualify under this preference for our efficiency units and our one-bedroom units. We've identified as we've gone along that we also have folks who would qualify for that, who would be a two-person household and they would qualify for one-bedroom units. So we want to update this preference to allow for the referral of those two-person families for the one-bedroom units under this preference as well. And this is just a slide showing the difference in the language so that we would make that update. Any questions on this one? Okay. That's the only change to the ACOP. The rest is going to be admin plan for the voucher programs. Okay, so this first one, we got to hear from a couple of the speakers from Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid on this topic. We are looking to change the abatement period when a unit in the voucher program's final fails due to items that are owned by the owner of the unit. The unit is abated, and we're wanting to increase that from a 30-day abatement period to a 60-day abatement period. Again, allowing the family in that unit to be able to search for a new unit, giving them more time in there with that protection. And we know that this is, we're trying to strike a delicate balance here because the way that this came about was that we were approached by HUD, other local organizations, wanting us to actually increase this to the 90 days, which you heard other cities have done as well. But we know that that's also difficult for some local landlords. We have to partner with them as well. It's really crucial that they're a part of our program. We don't exist without them. So in order to try and strike the balance between what would work best for our tenants, for our families, and also for our partnering landlords, we're wanting to increase this just to 60 days right now. Any questions on that?
What would the downfall be of going to 90 days?
The downfall of that is that those payments, those housing assistance payments, are abated the entire time that that time period is for. So the landlord is not receiving payments from Opportunity Home during that abatement period. So if we're going that out to 90 days, that's a longer period of time that the landlord would not be receiving those payments from our organization. Any other questions?
Just more of a comment than a question. I think it's important that we be clear that we're taking these steps and increasing the amount of time that's available once a unit has failed, or the landlords have really failed in this case, to repair the unit. I know that we've been criticized in the past and continue to be criticized for the length of time that it often takes for a tenant to find an appropriate unit. And I think in this case it's clear that we're attempting to reduce evictions and take a step that will directly assist the tenant. Even though we're increasing the period of time that a process might take, it actually has a direct benefit to the occupant. So I think it's important that we make sure that we tell that story and that people understand why we take the actions we do.
Absolutely, thank you.
I guess I want to make sure I totally understand this. We're increasing the amount of time that it can take, but that's not like it. The real group that needs to move is the landlord, right? It's on them to make the unit pass inspection as fast as possible. Am I understanding that correctly?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Stephanie Rodriguez. I'm over the assisted housing programs, and I'll kind of cover what the abatement period is and how it affects for both landlords and the residents.
Because I'll tell you where my brain is. My brain is trying to understand, is 60 days the right day for tenants? Is 90 days the right day for tenants? So I'm just trying to understand why we picked 60 versus 90.
So with the abatement period, whenever a unit is gone, we go out to inspect a unit. They get 2 times in order for the inspection to pass. And if it fails on the landlord only twice, then we considered an abatement period. And what this does is that it removes the HAP that's allowed to be paid to the landlord, and the landlord's not allowed to get that contract rent part that we would normally pay from the resident. So they lose out on that rental money for that we had before as a 30-day period. Moving it to a 90-day period, what we did, we had received information from HUD and other partners to increase that period so that landlords would lose 3 months worth of rental pay, especially if we were paying all of the contract rent, to allow the resident time to search within a reasonable time frame. And what we did is we wanted to continue to work with our landlords as well. So we had landlord work group meetings along with our partner meetings in order to discuss these items. And with how we've been struggling with our lease up, keeping our landlords' retention and keeping that partnership, a lot of the landlords had stressed that sometimes on those the landlord fails, the tenant doesn't allow access to the unit. So we were trying to strike a balance between the landlord and that 90-day period, allowing them to have search, giving more options. So we're working more with like the home base, affordablehousing.com, and all of those options to be able to give to the resident so they can better search for units within that time frame. We're also trying to reduce the time that it gets for them to be able to issue their voucher from that final fail. We're also looking at changing our dates so that they have more time for that abatement period when they actually get the final fail notice, because it's effective the next month. So if my unit final fails on the 27th of the month, 3 days of that period, and then that abatement period starts. But if it fails on the 2nd, they have that whole month, and then the abatement period starts that next month. So we're also trying to time it so that those inspections might fail earlier in the month, so it gives it a little bit of extra time without affecting that payment to the landlord, so that we can still work with them. And that's why we try to find that sweet spot between 30 days and 90 days, and so 60 days was what we had decided on as a partnership with our landlords and our advocates.
Can I just ask, or make another comment, and you can clarify? I know that in the past, we have had difficulty. In fact, in the state of Texas, it is legal to discriminate against a tenant based on source of income. So in other jurisdictions, it is illegal to discriminate based on source of income, but our residents that we assist can be denied a unit just because they're utilizing our assistance. And so, as I understand it, you're trying to find a place where we keep enough units in the system and enough landlords participating, because they're not required to participate and to accept our residents.
Right. And also to clarify, for this abatement period, it is for our current existing residents in a unit that fails, not necessarily a new person or somebody who's in that move process, because we inspect the units at that point. That's not, an abatement period doesn't occur that period. When they're moving to a new unit, if it doesn't pass, then we just can't start the contract until it passes. So these are for families that are already in place, they've been living there, and then it's just that the landlord didn't maybe do the repairs or unable to make those repairs. And so it allows them to get a unit or a voucher to search for a unit and have time to be able to search without having to pay that full contract rent to the landlord. And then the landlord not being able to try to get it from the resident during that abatement period. Thank you.
Then maybe some of the comparisons I was thinking about public comment, and just maybe in some of the places where they've gone all the way to 90, there is that protection. Because that was my thing, like if we go to 90, then does that now have a bunch of people not accepting vouchers because it's too strenuous? Is there anything in addition? I heard you say in some cases that it's a tenant that's not allowing the landlord to go in. Is there anything that's protecting landlords from that? I think if we really are trying to strike a balance, like, are we doing both sides?
So what we're also trying to do in those landlord work groups is explain to them they still have a lease with the resident. And so if there is a non-compliance with their lease, then they should be addressing that as a part of the lease concerns. So in the lease, it specifies that you do have to allow for access to the unit, or if they schedule maintenance, right, in order to report maintenance repairs, because sometimes they're not reported timely. And so we're trying to do more education to our landlords, and we're trying to work like on a tip sheet in order for them to say, these are items, you shouldn't treat them any different than other residents that are on your property just because they have Section 8. They still have a lease that they have to follow and to enforce their leases. And so then that's their protections that they would need to follow through on that sense.
One quick question. How many times a year does this happen, that we have a second fail?
So that is, I would say, a fairly large number, but as a part of this, there's also where if it final fails on the landlord, and it could be supply chain maintenance, they do have the option for a third inspection. So for some of those, they're not necessarily required to move. And so landlords may pay for a reinspection fee in order to get a third inspection, and then we remove the abatement and the contract stays in place. Now, I would say when we go out, we inspect, I want to say over 200 a month, but not all, most of them do pass. We haven't, I think it was 87%. I can get numbers to verify what our pass rate is, because we do like a monthly pass rate to see if we need to do more education to certain landlords.
Stephanie.
Yes.
I heard you state that after so many fails, you stop paying the rent, and the tenant pays their part, but we don't pay our part.
Correct.
Okay, so what is in place, or what happens, because the landlord can file eviction if they're not paying rent, the full rent.
So as a part of the HAP contract, it has specific parts in there that are attached to the lease that state that they cannot evict the resident for the non-payment of the HAP portion, as long as the resident is paying their portion of the rent. So as a part of that tenancy addendum that is attached to their lease, that's in like the HAP contract and lease are connected in that tenancy addendum.
So the tenant is protected?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, one more, sorry. In terms of I think this is great. And I'm glad that you all are working with landlords to make sure that, we can keep a healthy partnership. The one thing I keep thinking about is when these inspections aren't passed because the landlord really is having a hard time getting in the unit, and the tenant, and it's on the tenant now. There's a lot of assumptions, right, that they're being realistic about when tenants can do that, because if they're at work or what, it should create a lot of opportunities for the tenant to be able to give access. Is there anything within this, like, is it enough that that's in their lease agreement? Is there anything that needs to accompany this where it would say, unless there is enough evidence that shows that tenants weren't allowing landlords in? That's my last question.
So just to clarify, you're asking about the landlord protections that might be allowed to them. So as a part of they're enforcing their lease, but also for family obligations that residents sign, that they, in order to retain their assistance, they do have to comply with the lease. And if we get repeated lease violations or serious lease violations, they can lose their housing assistance. And so we try to stress on both sides. Enforce your lease so that you can ensure you're being protected on your end as a landlord. But on the resident side, if you want to keep your housing, you do need to comply with your lease as long as it's written in your lease and you're following through with that. And that if you continue to not allow for certain things to occur that are a part of your lease, you could lose your assistance in that sense. And so we do have those communications on both sides of the house, and they both could get more opportunities. If you did not, pass it, you can get a third inspection, or sometimes we waive the reinspection fee for the landlord to be able to continue that contract and get that money back, especially if it's like the repair might have occurred 1 week after we failed it the second time. And on the resident side, in the intent to terminate their assistance, to express that concern, like the landlord is your partner in this sense, and that you want to continue to be able to lease in our area or in our jurisdiction, and because it does go on your credit for any, if there's an eviction or any lease violations that occur, it could affect your credit and your lease up later.
Thank you.
So I have one more question for clarification. Sorry. When does the HAP contract terminate?
So for whenever we stop payment, that's the beginning of the abatement period, and then the end of the abatement period would be the end of the contract. So that's why the 60-day period would extend it's the abatement period, and it ends the HAP contract at that point, and that's where protections also end because the HAP contract ended.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, next one is that we are very excited. We were awarded 41 stability vouchers. These are new vouchers that came out from HUD. We're going to be updating our Chapter 20 in the admin plan with these policies for these vouchers. And just to recap the criteria for these vouchers, they're going to be for individuals and families experiencing or at risk of homelessness, fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or human trafficking, and veterans and families that include a veteran family member that meet one of the preceding criteria. So a pretty specific criteria for the vouchers. And we are working with our partner Close to Home, formerly known as South Alamo Regional Alliance for the Homeless, for referrals for these vouchers. They're a local continuum of care, the COC, and work with other local organizations to receive folks who may be eligible for our vouchers, and they go through Close to Home to be referred to us. So Close to Home will be providing supportive services to those families, and they're also going to be ensuring that they meet that criteria before they're referred to us. What we're going to be doing, just for your information, is that we're going to be posting information about these stability vouchers for families that are currently on our Housing Choice Voucher waiting list. If they are eligible, they could apply for these vouchers as well and go through Close to Home's referral process to us for that. Any questions on that? These policies are not in the slides, the language on these, because it's very lengthy. There's a large section that's going to be added for these vouchers. So this and for the following program I'm going to cover, those are in your packet. Okay. And lastly, we have created our own program. This is a working title, Income-Based Housing Assistance. This may change. But this is, we were able to create this through an option for a local non-traditional program. The way that is brought about is that we are able to create our own program as an MTW agency that is outside of public housing and housing choice voucher rules. We just have to make sure that we're using MTW funds for that program and that it's serving families that are at or below 80% of the area median income. So we are requiring that, and we are creating this program with a mixture, essentially, of public housing rules and housing choice voucher. So I'll go over that a little bit. So some key elements of this program are that eligibility, rent calculation, and lease requirements for the program are going to be determined using public housing rules. Current public housing residents may receive a preference, a waitlist preference, to move to a property that's operating this new program if they meet the eligibility requirements. We're going to be having a few items that are different criteria for that preference. They would have to be in close proximity to that property that's operating the program. They have to be in good rental standing, and they have to, of course, meet the eligibility requirements of that property. And then also note that the assistance through this program is going to be project-based, and that's through a voucher that is tied to the unit. So here's where the voucher part comes in. Families are not going to be eligible to move with the assistance from this program since it is tied to the unit, but we want to ensure that we're providing options for families if they do need to move due to an emergency or any other issue that comes up. So if they do require that transfer, they're given a priority to receive a next available unit with that program assistance. Are there questions on this?
I'd love to learn what problem you all were trying to solve when you came up with this solution.
Yes, and I think maybe Brandy might want to speak to that, but I'll give that to her. But I will say that I think we're trying to create something that's a good mix of the programs that we have right now. So we know that the rules that we have for our public housing program work really well for a lot of our residents and for our community partners, but they're not as flexible in some ways. So this was sort of a solution for that. But if you'd like to add anything else.
So we're always looking for solutions, right, to better meet the needs of our community, our residents. And so what we recognize as we have been looking at our new developments, such as Snowden and Alazon, it's really those protections that we've heard a lot about, what public housing brings versus what Section 8 may bring, going with management companies that don't screen our residents, may screen some of our residents out because of past decision-making or credit. And so what we wanted to do is kind of blend both programs, and that's how we developed the income-based housing assistance, really acknowledging if we're going to add this to some of those developments that we're creating, this is going to outline what our requirements are. If for some reason we're not managing it and we have to go out to a third party, this is what we're going to make them use in order to make sure that our residents aren't able to go back to some of these new developments. And so in mine, one of the largest one was Allison, right? We heard a lot of community feedback as well as the resident feedback to say, you're building a lot of these new communities, but they're not being built for us. And so we wanted to ensure that they were be protected and be able to go back with no problems whatsoever based off of these new policies that we were putting in place.
When you say problems, affordability problems or qualification problems?
Qualification problems. And just those protections, right? I know for some of the newer board members, there are a lot of protections. And when we mean protections, if that are not in in a private sector or a private landlord situation. And so when you're receiving assistance through any housing authority, if you're a public housing, one of the things is if you get a notice or a lease violation. In the private sector, it stays in your file. With public housing, you get a lease violation. You have the opportunity to come in and appeal it and say, this was the source, this was not mine, this was the situation. And so it goes through a panel. And so some of those protections is really what we heard our residents say they wanted. And we wanted to ensure that if, for instance, we were not managing, whoever we hired to manage those properties would manage very similar ways of the public housing properties would.
There was a lot of discussion initially at Alazan, as Brandy mentioned, and what I was hearing, what we were hearing from the residents was they wanted the protection of the public housing program because that gave them more stability long-term than a private landlord. And we manage the properties differently, we qualify people differently, et cetera. And as you know, our residents, even though we refer to 80% and below, our typical resident that's on a subsidy is,
30%.
yes, about $11,000 a year in income. So it's very likely they have credit issues and banking issues and things of that sort that might prevent them from leasing a unit with a private landlord. So those are all not applicable in our case.
Trying to figure out the correct choice on these words, but okay, so I'm excited about the program. I think, are we going to be doing this in form of vouchers? How is that going to be administered?
So, easy question, right? It's MTW funds, right? So that's the form of our public housing, or the ability to have the flexibility for public housing if needed, or the Section 8 funding. So it's utilized through our Moving to Work funds. You will often hear us talk about the L&T component, right? The local non-traditional. So
Right.
It all wraps in there, but it's going to be the combination of where we have the funding source to fund these units.
So, and what we heard from the residents at that time was, to them, it didn't matter what funding source we were using. It's the rules that concern
That's
them the
important,
most.
yeah.
And so we started trying to move our terminology to income-based housing instead of public housing or Section 8 or
Right.
project-based vouchers or what have you. The units that we're offering right now to our partners, we have 1,700 units available that we can receive HUD funding from. And those are sometimes called fair cloth units. They're units that we have allocated to us that are not constructed at this point. So we're actively offering those to our partners and other developers as well.
That's the natural thing, is that now our developer partners will come and say, hey, okay, then does it make it more advantageous to them that we have a program like this to draw from? It's not the PVV that they've typically have asked for, but it is another avenue, another vehicle for us to use.
I think, as Ed mentioned, I think we really are aggressively pursuing the fair cloth and what opportunities that brings to the organization and to a lot of our partners. I think it's a path that we haven't really been as aggressive in trying to see what does that mean. And I think that this does give another tool in our toolbox to do and utilize with our partners and have further conversations, that it isn't just project-based vouchers, because as we talked about, that does not create new housing opportunities, right? That's just a source to help with the development to perform when banks are looking at making loans. And so I think that this is a great opportunity, as Ed mentioned, the Fair Cloth conversation.
And next week, we have HUD people here visiting from DC, and the meeting topic is going to be Fair Cloth to RAD, so we can take some of those units, the 1,700 units, and convert them to RAD units. And many of our partners are familiar with RAD, so we're hoping that'll make it more attractive for them. So that meeting's scheduled for next week.
Good.
How many families is this projected to serve, and or how many units and these are new units that we're talking, right?
So they would be new. It's new units in how we're using them today. So as I mentioned, we are planning on using it at Snowden, and then Allison. Right now, it's the conversation of the Allison expansion, which is the 88 units. I believe at Snowden, it's roughly around 50 units, but give or take. But what we're saying is, here's the policy as we are looking at new developments or where we can use this. We have this as an opportunity for the properties that we are right now focused on is the owning and the managing, but we know that there could be other opportunities with several partners.
There's another nuance here that we really haven't talked about, but as you know, we've been paying the debt off at several properties. Wood Hill was one, and then Crown Meadows, Legacy of Crown Meadows is the one we brought to the committee today. And the intention there is, without debt, the property can support lower rents. So we would implement a local program at that property that would be income-based housing over the long term and enable us to underwrite the reduction in rents, from our own resources, because the property doesn't have debt service that it needs to pay.
Good.
Any other questions?
For Brandy?
Okay.
Because I'm back.
Now, real quick, I am going to back up to the stability vouchers. That those 41 additional items that we were awarded. I read in the deal with regards to close to home. They're going to be administering the wraparound services, if I remember correctly.
Correct.
Okay. Would this? We have recently made available to them 150 vouchers. This would be in addition to that they're going to be able to utilize.
And just to clarify, it's all the partners that are involved with Close to Home through the continuum of care. So all the partners that they work with are providing those services.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be really specific.
Yeah, the allocation of the 150 is to Close to Home, but all of the partners that are in the continuum can
we'll have access to the 41.
Okay, so let's separate. So income-based housing has nothing to do with the special
I backed all the
programs.
way up. Yeah.
Okay, so you backed all the way up. The 41, it's a partnership between us and Close to Home. They're allocated based off of the need of anybody that is accessing, any of the partners that are already part of the continuum of care are accessing Home Link, and the based off of the system that all the partners in the community have come up with, it ranks the highest need, and those are the ones that those vouchers are going to go to. Those partners are responsible for providing the case management. Okay. So it's Close to Home is just really our facilitator of all of they're really the ones that we're getting the referrals from, but those are coming in through our partners.
But those 41, right?
We still administer, issuing the vouchers. Okay. All the case management is done by partners.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
We have no further questions. I'll entertain a motion.
I motion we pass item number 8 to the board meeting for approval.
Can you please indicate I need to abstain? I'm the board chair of Close to Home.
Okay. I will second. And we've got one abstention.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Christine. Item number 9, consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6408, approving the 2024 Small Area Fair Market Rents, SAFMR, payment standard and the project-based vouchers, PBV, program payment standard schedule. Stephanie Rodriguez, Director of Assisted Housing Programs.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. So the item I'm bringing today for you is our small area fair market rents and our PBV, which is like the main area fair market rents standards. And this is what we would normally use as a part of our, our process. It's a part of the calculation to determine how much the rent is being paid by the resident versus what we're being able to pay. So we normally review our payment standards annually. Last year, we actually reviewed it a couple times. So we brought it to you a couple times last year in order to increase our payment standards in order to cover like that market. So HUD released their current numbers in October. We try to review them as quickly as possible so that we can implement them and review if we need to increase or compare against those fair market rents established by HUD annually. And so there, I remember in our last, I think ops meeting that I was able to present, I gave you a little bit of information about the assisted housing programs and how that works and the payment standard that's a part of it. So the fair market rents, there is a generalized one for the Bexar County area, but then also for us, we have small area fair market rents, and those are related to zip codes, and then we group them into smaller groups instead of having everybody given a specific zip code and amount related to every single zip code in San Antonio or our supported areas. And so for this, we're looking to increase our payment standards for some of the sizes so that we can reach that 90 to 110% range that's normally done by HUD for those fair market rents. And so this is to increase the subsidy that we would be able to pay, which would affect the residents' portion for their total tenant payment. They would possibly either decrease their portion and increase our portion as we go through this. So sorry. So again, we are looking to set those payment standards to the 90 and 110%. Previously, we were closer to like the 100 and 110, 115%. With the numbers that we currently have, we were mostly within the same amounts that would be allowed under the payment standards, but we did want to increase for those zip codes and groupings that did look like they raised up as a part of this fair market rent change that HUD came out with. So the proposed rule will be effective for January 1 movers or new vouchers that are issued. If they're currently in place, we have recertifications that we normally would update the payment standard as related to that, or for rental increase requests when we do our reviews, and so those would be effective April 1, 2024. And so for these, we have 10 established zip codes, and you can see here what we did is we did a current comparison, so from what's proposed, and you're going to see most of those changes are going to be in these smaller bedroom sizes, 0, 1, 2, but the 3, 4s, and 5s, on some of them, they did change. This is only showing group 1 and group 10. You're going to see that there wasn't too much of a change for like group 1 other than those smaller sizes. For a 3-bedroom, it did change under group 10, but you'll see the other sizes didn't really change that much. As we saw, the fair market rents fairly increased because there is a larger market for 0, 1s, 2s in the area, and then those larger bedroom sizes, there's not as many, and they did not show much of a change in those fair market rents. But we did want to, we actually did see some decreases actually in those larger sizes, but what we wanted to do is make sure that we were still being able to assist our families as a part of those, so we did not lower those as long as they stayed within that 90 and 110%. So right now, the financial impact that we're looking at is a 4.7 increase, and that would be on the average, and it is not going to be like immediate. As I said, the effective date for movers and new voucher issuances would be January, and then those annual recertifications or changes to the rental increase would start in April, and those happen as the recertifications occur.
Who does the impact fall on, us or them?
The impact will fall on us.
Okay, good.
So that's the small area for market rents. I'm going to pause there because then PBV is a little bit different.
What's the, HUD's maximum is 120%?
So HUD allows us to go up to 120% if it's needed for like a reasonable accommodation. Anything over that, then we would have to request for like an exception from HUD as a part of that additional reasonable accommodation. But normally HUD requires 90 to 110%.
Okay, what's the delta if our impact is 404,000 roughly
Per month.
per month? I mean, did we ever look at, if we can go to HUD max at 120?
So when you look at the payment standards in relation to what you're able to pay, we are given a certain amount of money every year. And so we don't get an increase in that monies based on like the number of vouchers. So if we increased our per unit cost on an average all the way up to that 120%, that is less families that we would be able to assist on the program. So let's say for right now we have the 11,600, and that's what we're proposing for this amount in order to still kind of be able to assist. If we did raise it up to that 120, we might only be able to assist 10,000 or less families because we wouldn't hit that max of our budget authority allowed.
And have we run that trap? Have we tried to figure out what that, I mean, well, let me rephrase that. Can we run that trap to figure out what that is?
So we could do an analysis. We normally look at the as a part of our analysis for the payment standards, we look and see based on what increases and how many less we might be able to assist, but not to that full 120%. So we could do that.
So, yeah, right, and as part of the budgeting process every year, we revisit what our average HAP cost is, and we know today that the average HAP cost is approaching $800 per unit, which is more than what we had budgeted for this year.
Correct.
And that's being driven by the local rents. So we're different from a regular housing authority. We will not recover that money from HUD next year as an MTW agency because we're funded in the contractual basis.
Right.
We do hope to get an inflationary adjustment next year, which hopefully would be 3 or 4 or 5%, but we're still on a continuing resolution, as you know. So we're limited by the total dollars that we pay out. So if we fund more in landlord payments, that means fewer number of residents we can help.
So, and also just to kind of add to that too is if they, as years go, if they do proration factors as a part of that HAP, even though we might say that their budget authority would be a certain amount, they might have a proration factor that gives us less. And so then as you get to that point where you might have to then remove people from the program if you are over the budget and you can't sustain it. So what we do is we try to make sure that we're retaining as many families as we can assist with the ideal that we are going to be able to sustain them on the program.
One question, are we aware of any areas in which our SAFMR is lower than the tax credit rent for the 40% units or the 60% units, I guess?
So we did, whenever we do the review, we did ask to see if we could get that. We have not gotten that review back yet, but we did ask to see, based on those tax credits across our groupings, how that would affect the payment standards in those properties.
I would certainly like to see that information when it's available. Thank you.
Yes. Any other questions related to the small area fair market rents? Okay. So the next one we call PBV. These are project-based vouchers, which are different than the regular housing choice vouchers. Project-based vouchers are tied to a specific property. And so under the project-based voucher, we normally do have to review annually for the payment standards related to these as well. But it is different in the sense of once we set the project-based voucher payment standard amounts, at every year, the time that they had signed their HAP contract under the PBV, that's when they could do rental increase requests, and we would look at payment standard, but also the comparables for the area in order to determine what that would be. And then the assistance that's provided under project-based voucher is the contract rent is set, and then the tenant portion is set to whatever based on their income, and there isn't necessarily like a separate subsidy that may increase that residence portion. So it's a little different than on the small area farm market rents. They could lease up higher than the payment standard. On this one, the payment standards is usually used to set those contract rents and review for that. Now, what we do on these also is that MAFMR, right? This is what we would normally call it. For PBVs, if the MAFMR is higher, we would normally go with those for that zip code grouping. If it is lower, then we'd go with the higher of these small area for market rents or the MAFMRs for PBV programs. So here you're going to see what our previous year was, 918, 960 for the PBV payment standards, and this one does not have a bunch of groupings in it because, again, it's for the whole area, and we go with the higher of. So if we had a project-based program at one property that, let's say they were in Group 9 of the SAFMR, and Group 9 is higher than our PBV payment standards, we would use the SAFMR review for that property because they're in a higher payment zip code standard. If they're in the lower ones and that payment standard is lower under the SAFMR, we would go with the PBV payment standards in order to review for those properties. I know that was probably a little confusing, but if you have any questions on that, you're definitely welcome to answer or ask. And so then financial impact, right now we're looking at only less than a 1% increase as a part of this impact because the fair market rents that we had already established last year were fairly high. Any questions related to either one or go back to the other one?
I heard you say that if the monies weren't there, that we would have to push people out of the program. Do you all kind of make sure that we don't get into that situation?
Correct. So we monitor extensively on our utilization, and right now we're leasing up because we had, the COVID had hit, we were low in utilization, so we are doing a fairly good lease up right now, but we do try to keep on monitoring once we hit a certain level to make sure that our funding is we're not overspending on our funding, and we look at our per unit cost monthly and as a part of our review, and so that's something we would continuously look at. I think the last time that it happened where we had to have people leave was 2008. It's been a really long time, and that was based on we were not allowed to lease up for a certain amount of time, and then we had to do a crazy lease up, and then it was a part of appropriations, and I think there was it didn't pass, and we didn't get funding at that time. So we've since 2008, we've been very, very extensively looking at our utilization and how we can continue to assist our families.
Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I entertain a motion.
I motion we move resolution, is this the right one? 9? Okay, 6408 to the board meeting for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
No, real quick before the vote. If we take a look at the change, would that impact this, or is it something we can amend, or how does that work if we?
We'll be looking at it. We'll bring the estimates back to the board so you can take a look at the cost impact. But I am absolutely sure that we do the analysis every year when we budget our Section 8 program, right, because we're trying to get the accurate number of vouchers in our budget for the year. So that's happening in the next 2 or 3 months as part of our budgeting process. So we'll have an opportunity to look at it again.
Okay, so we can push this one. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
So also to add to that, like last year where we looked at, we came to you a couple different times with the SAFMRs if we were going to be changing them or increasing. So it would be the same where if we do set it for this one, we may increase it later if it does. So we always look at the patterns, but we try not to decrease. That's the only thing.
And I think one thing that Brandy reminds me is there's a long tail on this. So whenever we make an adjustment, we're still probably dealing with the adjustment from last year because as contracts renew and come up, that's when we see the impact. And it may be even a year later before we see the cost impact of this decision.
Thank you very much.
With no further comments, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We'll move on to discussion items. Item number 10, discussion regarding the proposed 2024 board meeting calendar. Muriel Roeder, Chief Administrative Officer.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So we put a draft calendar into your packet today. What I wanted to do was go over any deviations that we did from having the board meeting on the first Wednesday of the month and the committee meetings on the third Wednesdays of the month. So the first month that this takes effect is in the month of April. And in April, what we have, we would normally do the April board meeting that first Wednesday in April. However, we have the MTW Collaborative that week and during that time. So if we pushed it back to the next week, what we just found out a couple of weeks ago was that the NARO Washington conference was that week. So what we did was moved it up. So this is a little bit of an anomaly because we're having an April board meeting at the end of March. But we just did want you to know that that was the reason why we made that change. So it's still on a Wednesday, except it's on the last Wednesday in March. The next change we made was for June. Normally the June board meeting is the first Wednesday in June. We moved it to the second Wednesday in June because the FADA National Conference is that week, June 2nd through the 5th. In September, we had many conflicts. The first one is related to a staff conflict for that actual date of the 18th. And then when we tried to move it up, that's when the FADA Legislative Conference was. When we tried to move it back, that's when the NARO National Conference was. So what we did was we moved it sideways to that Monday. So Monday, September 16th is the date that we proposed for that committee meeting. And then the last one was for October. So the first week in October, the 2nd through the 4th, is Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so we want to be respectful of that. So we moved the October board meeting to the 9th. So those were really the only deviations that we made this current year. These dates should already be on your calendars. But wanted to talk through some of these changes that we made. Do I have any questions? So, correct. So, yes, we'll have back-to-back meetings at the end of March. So we'll have the March 6th, which was the March board meeting, March 20th, which will be the Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. And then the following week will be technically the board meeting for April, which will be March 27th. Okay.
Yeah, as long as we've got advance notice and it doesn't impact, I know as we push, or as deals are getting pushed through TDHCA, just call us in for them as necessary, so.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Muriel. Item number 11, discussion regarding San Antonio Independent School District school closure impact on Opportunity Home students. Richard Melf, Planning Officer.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We wanted to look at the impact of what was a few weeks ago a proposal and what is today something that the board, SAISD, has taken action on. So you'll see in your slides that you've got sort of the edits. You've got the original maps and numbers that were provided to you originally, and then there's some edits on top of it. I'll walk through that. The question for us was what is the impact going to be, right, on the population that Opportunity Home serves. And so on this slide, the first one, you have the boundaries of SAISD. You have the campuses in red icons, and then you have those are the campuses that were proposed to be closed originally. And then you have in the circled the 4 schools that were taken off the closure list on Monday. So that's kind of the pattern going forward. We acknowledge up front that we don't track attendance of our residents, kids today. So the proxy we use is address. So if they're within the boundary, then we count them. And who is the other question? So we looked at households with children under 18 years of age in public housing, in a voucher program and assisted housing programs, and on our housing wait lists. We also looked at some historical context. So we wanted to get place today's numbers within a little bit of a timeline. The chart on the left is public housing. The chart on the right is assisted housing programs. And so this was educational because there is a difference. And we went back 10 years to January 2013. So the chart shows the number of households that are within the school district boundaries. So with public housing, the percentage has remained relatively constant over the last 10 years. It's gone from 71 to 72%. The absolute number has dropped by 400 or 500, depending on how you count. But overall, there's been very little change over the last 10 years in the number of public housing residents in SAISD. For assisted housing, for vouchers, it's a different story. And we've seen a pretty significant drop in the number, both absolute and to a certain extent the percentage. The percentage has dropped 3 points from 28 to 25%. But in absolute terms, you see a drop from 5,305 to 3,212. And fairly constant with a few peaks every now and then. And we think that some of that may have to do with when we started to implement small area FMR, so that's which we just heard about, and then the pandemic as well. So that's a little bit of context that within which the following numbers should be kept in mind.
How do go ahead. How do we calculate this?
We just look at the addresses of. I'm sorry, maybe I don't understand the question.
I guess I'm trying to figure out, is it like SAISD reported data?
No,
or is it?
No. We just looked at the addresses. We have the boundaries, so we can see which addresses fall within the district boundaries.
So my question would be, looking at the data in the second chart on the right, that voucher holders with larger families chose to move out of SAISD attendance zones.
This is independent of family size. This is all voucher holders. Yeah.
All right, then let me look at the AHP count versus AHP. Tell me the derivation of those two, of the count versus the percentage.
The absolute count is the absolute number of households that. So in 2013 there were 5,305 in SAISD, and today there's 3,212. And that represents a percentage drop from 28 to 25.
Helpful, thank you.
Thanks. There were my talking points. Okay, great.
Okay, clear as mud. Sorry, now I started second guessing this. So going back to that chart, what the chart on the right represents are those in the assisted housing program. We had 5,300 10 years ago within the SAISD boundaries.
Correct.
And then today, now there's 3,200 or so within the same boundary. Okay. Right.
So there's different dynamics, right? So public housing, stable population count over the last 10 years. Individual households may come and go, right? But those properties stay the same.
If they're public housing then, they're public housing today.
Vouchers move, right? That the program was designed for to promote mobility, and they move. And so, but what is unique about this is that, you know, within the the fixed boundary that we happen to be looking at, SAISD, we can see that there's been a migration, well,
Way.
I don't know, I can't say that these are folks moving away from SAISD, right? Because it could be that
They graduated.
they left the program, and as new folks came on the program, they never started, right? They started somewhere else. But what we can say is that today there are fewer households with a voucher within SAISD boundaries than 10 years ago.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm thinking.
Okay, I'll be ready. I'll be ready. So so given that context and given what we know, what we don't know, the next question was, well, what do we mean by impact? And the other thing was on Monday when we started looking at the decision that was made and going through the details, we realized that it wasn't just about closures, that there were campuses whose closures were scheduled for this year, some that were scheduled for future years. There were some that are expansions, there were some that are mergers, there are some where they're swapping students for a few years. So we realized there's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of moving parts. But what we do know is we do know the boundaries. So we know the district boundaries, and we know the attendance zones. And so we can put at least some bookmarks, right? Bookends on our estimation, so that we can say at a maximum level, we think the impact is going to be X, and maybe at a more targeted and focused level, the impact is going to be Y. And so that's what I'm going to walk y'all through right now. And it also depends on the program, as we'll see. So if we look at all the population, public housing, Section 8, assisted housing programs, and wait lists, we're looking at a child population universe of 89,186. Those are all the kids. 24% of them are within the SAISD boundaries. That's 21,632 children younger than 18. And there's a breakout there by other age groups. So that's the big number, right? 21,000. That's public housing, Section 8, and wait list, and that just living within the district. And the rationale for that might be, again, there's a lot we don't know. Even if they don't happen to live within the attendance zone of a school that's closing, a relative might be, or their school might get an influx of students as a result. Or if they're coming off a wait list a couple years from now, they end up having fewer options than they do today. So again, that's with a maximal kind of approach to what is impact.
And for waitlist, you're using the address on the waitlist application of current
That's
resident?
Right.
Okay.
That's right. So the next, I'm just going to focus on the number in the box. The 8% is what you had in your original presentation. 6% reflects our understanding of the decision made on Monday. So that's what we'll focus on. And so that's, if we wanted to really have a narrow definition of impact, then we would just look at kids that live within the attendance zones of schools that are closing, as we understand closing. And that is 5,722 kids across, again, public housing, Section 8, and wait lists. So now we can look at, let's take wait list off the table, right, just for a second, and just look at current residents, public housing and assisted housing programs. 41% of them, of those kids are within SAISD, that's 7,700 children. And then 9% live within the targeted attendance zones, that's 1,800 children. We put together some maps by program just to show kind of the differences. So this is public housing specifically. Again, 6,193 children in public housing throughout the city. 72% of those are within SAISD. So that's a big number right there, 72%. That's 4,500 kids. With now, only 9% of them are within the targeted attendance zones. That's only 500 children. We see, if you look at the map, there's those 3 bright yellow hot spots on the west side. Those are our big 3, Alasan, Lincoln, and then Casiano plus San Juan on the lower left. I think the other thing I would point out is that most of the hotspots are outside a targeted campus area. That's why there's only 532 children directly impacted. But there was one on the west side around Storm Elementary, and then there were 3 on the east side. I think were Pershing, Tynan, and Miller. If I can't see from here, but and I know Pershing was taken off the list, so that mitigates that imbalance a little bit. If we look at assisted housing programs, you see the hotspots spread out a little bit within the district boundaries. Here we're talking about 12,000 kids, 25% of the universe within SAISD, that's 3,000 children. 10% are within the targeted attendance zones, that's 1,200 kids. So the hotspots are different, right, on this map. They're Section 8 households live in a wider variety of areas. The hotspot on the west side is around our San Juan 1, 2, and 3. The hotspot on the east side is not related to just one of our properties. There's a couple properties there, one partnership and one that's completely unaffiliated with us. And finally, if we look at the wait list, a very different pattern again. These are folks that live throughout the district. There's 70,000 kids on our wait list. 20% live within SAISD, nearly 14,000 children. The bright yellow hotspot is Haven for Hope. So we have a lot of applicants that currently live at Haven for Hope or use that address for their application. So I'm going to I think there's one more slide where I share some initial observations. I know there's still a lot of understanding here, but we can say that that the impact varies by program, right? Public housing, the direct impact will be limited, but we see two schools on the east side, one on the west side that might have a direct impact on some public housing residents. Having said that, indirect impacts are likely to be felt across the program because there's such a large concentration of public housing in SAISD, 72%. For assisted housing, whatever kind of impact we think about has to be taken in the context of the 10 years of decline that we've seen. Having said that, there is a large number of 1,263 kids in targeted campus areas, and there's some number in every targeted attendance zone. So since Section 8 households are more spread out, there will be a direct impact in every closure campus. Wait lists are really complex to think about. There's so many, the timing, some move faster than others, but the numbers are so large that it's hard to just set them aside. You have to think about them a little bit. Nearly 4,000 kids just within the targeted attendance zones that are on our wait list. And then the sheer number of 14,000 that are within the district boundaries whose options will be impacted. So. And I think that's it. So open to questions and discussion.
Going back one slide real quick on the east side, is that number still, did we update? Sorry, one more up. The very last slide you looked at.
I'm sorry?
The very last slide you looked at, this one.
That one.
More
Okay.
direct impact on east side, three versus one.
I forgot to update that.
Okay.
It should be 2 versus 1. Thank you.
I think my big question is, from watching the SAISD board meeting, the demographer that did the equity study that talked about the impact of the equity study on students, and the one thing that was evident from their analysis was that the one factor that would help was if students were being transferred to a higher performing school. And he noted that most of the receiving schools for students who are displaced are either of equal or lesser performance when you're talking about student academic performance. I wonder if there is any way that we're thinking about educating families, connecting with families to learn more about how they're being impacted, where they're getting information, how they're receiving choice counseling. What are barriers? Do they know their options for a higher quality school? Do they know how to, exercise those options?
I know we have had some meetings and done some outreach with some folks that recently and historically, but Joelle can provide some additional information on that.
Yes, at your suggestion, I met with Adriana Piscina Rios. We talked a lot. She gathered a lot of information. She said she was going to reach out to partners in the ecosystem to see who would be best to do those kinds of meetings, and that she would get back. So I'm just waiting on a response from her.
Do we have any staff that's assigned to any of these properties that already are, is it promotoras, or they're on campus, on each of the properties doing other community-based work that we could leverage?
We have service coordinators. They do have specific grant targets that they are trying to achieve. This might be outside of the scope of many of them, but primarily they're service coordinators. They coordinate with partners. And so that's why we were holding off to see if Adriana came back with any partners that we could coordinate those meetings for.
Yeah.
But our staff does not have this expertise to provide.
Because part of it is like, who do families already know that are already providing services that they trust, right? Because part of the issue is like, will families open the door to a random door knocker if some community partner that they don't even know and have never been in relationship with hosts a fair, they may not show up, right?
Well, that's kind of how we work, though, is that we work with partners, we bring them onto our properties. Again, service coordination is primarily what we do. Some of our programs are intensive case management, and we hit a very small number of residents that way. But when we're trying to do, like, for example, our Resident Opportunity and Self-Sufficiency Program, our ROS program, because there's no financial incentive attached to it, it's more of kind of a concierge. We're doing resource fairs, we're doing things like that. But again, we're coordinating through experts who come in and provide the actual services.
So you all could help with getting information to residents, helping residents know and come to meetings. And
If the information is provided to us, we can certainly disseminate it. Otherwise, we would coordinate meetings where partners would provide the content.
Okay. And has SAISD reached out, or have we talked to them about what partnership could look like to make sure that families, we're talking about the most vulnerable families in San Antonio.
As I understand, we reached out and they haven't gotten back to us. But I think
Okay.
Along that lines, I think that was one of the questions that I had. It's like how this impacts many of our families who don't maybe have transportation. Now there's no longer a school. School districts are, of course, incumbent upon within their changes to make sure that people have transportation. But maybe there's something we can do specific to our residents. I don't know what that looks like, but something to consider.
Yeah, I think as we meet with residents and organize these meetings, we'll look for any feedback that they provide, perhaps, and make sure that bubbles up to the executive team.
Okay.
Thank you for doing this level of work.
And we'll circle back to make sure that if there's any way city education partners can help with connecting with families, bringing resources, or even considering a grant to support promotora work, to reach families to do choice counseling or something. That's something we can talk about.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Nope. Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard.
Item number 12, update and discussion regarding Lincoln Heights and Casiano Homes. Joel Tabor, Director of Resident Services.
Hi, good afternoon. I am the Director of Resident Services, which is comprised of both the community management side of public housing and the resident engagement side, formerly known as CDI. which has the resident service coordinators. So Ruth Bautista, Assistant Director over the portfolio that includes both Castellano and Lincoln, is going to talk about some of the physical improvements. And then Viridiana Rivera, she's going to talk about our community partnerships at these properties also.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm so glad to be here to share some updates regarding Castellano Homes and Lincoln Heights. So today for our Castellano updates, we'll be covering pest control, security, plumbing, and beautification. So regarding our pest control, to effectively control pests such as roaches, each Castellano household receives a monthly routine pest control treatment. When there is increased pest or roaches, then we use the Actisol treatment in the units. What I am excited to explain is that we are introducing a new aggressive rodent and pest control treatment regarding the Castellano homes. That includes for the pest controls, right now we are working with our vendor regarding an additive that we will be adding to the paint that repels pests or roaches in the units. We're going to be using this, or we are using this in our make ready. We implemented that, and so we should be receiving some feedback by the end of this year on the eradication of that. And regarding the aggressive rodent treatment, I'm glad to say that we're working with our vendor at Castellano, where they are actually using metal bait boxes that are being placed and grounded into the ground, and we're using new bait that focuses on the reproduction or on the breeding of the rodents. So we should be receiving some feedback on using those elements for the eradication of the rodents. So in addition to the pest control and the rodent treatments, we are also providing housekeeping standards, which is very important if our residents are needing assistance. We do have free training and information that we share with them. Also practicing good sanitation and training. The next item I'd like to go ahead and mention is security. Texas Lawman does perform daily random pest controls at Castellano homes, and they provide management reports at the end of each day. These management reports allow the properties to go ahead and look into and investigate any concerns that are reported by Texas Lawman. They're actually there to deter threats and ensure the overall well-being of the community. In addition, we're holding monthly community safety meetings held at the Good Samaritan, and that is open to the public, and it allows our residents to coordinate and our staff that is at Castellano to work with our law enforcement to discuss further safety initiatives. The other item at Castellano is plumbing. It's posed significant challenges at Castellano homes throughout the previous fiscal year, extending in the current year. So right now, for example, some of the problems that we're experiencing at Castellano homes were flushable wipes, items that have been found by our maintenance vendor inside the cleanouts like toys, in the bathroom or in the kitchen pipes. So right now, our superintendents are working with our HD supplier to explore using tamper-proof sewer caps to minimize these plumbing issues. Now, what I did want to share with you, these are just some pictures of some of the clay and cast iron pipes that are seen throughout Castellano homes. And so they have well surpassed their expected life expectancy, their lifespan. And so the next picture shows that after the plumbing is prepared, we use more improved material to maintain our plumbing systems. And the Castellano team has worked very hard on the property beautification. These are just some of the initiatives. I'll be sharing some pictures on what they have been doing at the Castellano homes. They upgraded the resident council meeting space, the resident waiting lobby, the playground equipment, it's interactive concrete games, and they've also improved the front landscaping in the front office. And some of the larger beautification progress have been over implementing a gradual color transformation across the property. We've also increased waste management pickups from 2 to 3 times a week. And what we're proud to say is that the 6 existing murals that have been redone with the valuable assistance of the original artists from the San Antonio Community Cultural Arts Organization. So here you can see some of the property beautification for the playground area. That includes the concrete games, which includes a basketball court. And this is the front landscaping of Casiano Homes. And it allows for benches and areas for our residents to rest and play. And of course, we have the resident lobby and the resident council meeting space. The resident lobby actually has water and snacks and drinks while the residents wait. And the resident council actually has their own meeting space, which is the bottom 2 pictures that are presented.
Were these recently redone? I mean,
I'm sorry?
they were recently redone?
Yes, sir, they were. And so that wraps up some of the improvements that we've been able to do at the Casiano Homes. Do we have any questions? Okay. I'd like to move over into the Lincoln updates. I know recently on September 9th, we had a resident meeting that was hosted by the Lincoln Property Management, and our CEO, Mr. Ed Hinojosa, was there, and I know that some of our commissioners were there. And we were there, we invited the residents to come and speak with us to discuss the development timelines and priorities for the West Side community. There were 3, there were common feedback from the residents that had to do with some of the black substance or mold that was found in the units, condensation in living rooms, and sidewalk replacements of Menchaca, which I'm glad to say that the contractors repaired all the broken and cracked sidewalks on Menchaca, and I'll share some pictures of that. From the feedback that we received from the residents that were there, we went ahead and initiated what we called a mildew pilot project. This was launched to introduce a new exhaust fan in the bathroom. It also serves as a heater and a light fixture in the bathroom, and then we also implemented new ceiling fans in the living room. So we're glad to say that those residents that came to speak and express their concerns, we followed up with them 6 weeks later, and they were actually very satisfied. There was no mildew in the bathrooms or condensations in the living rooms. So right now, moving forward, what we're doing is that we're working on pricing for the installation of the new materials in the new units. So we're excited about that. And here are just some pictures of the sidewalk repair on Menchaca. They did a wonderful job. This gives you a bird's eye view of the pilot project of the exhaust fan and the ceiling fan installation. And that is my presentation for the Lincoln Heights properties. Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for fixing those areas. I know some of those we saw when we took our tour of the area. One of those looks like one of the areas that I brought up that needed to be repaired. But so thank you for doing that, and also fixing the pipes and stuff like that and bringing it up to code. I mean, it's a small Band-Aid for a very old project, but thank you for doing it. I have a couple of pest control, and it seems to always be an issue. You know, people talking about always pests and I'm not just talking about there, but I'm talking about probably everywhere, especially with the vendor that does it. I had pest control done today in my apartment, and couple of things. Number one, they walk in and just basically spray here, spray there, spray there. I had to stop them and say, well, you need to spray behind the stove and on the sides and under the refrigerator and on the sides, and so I don't think they're doing a thorough job. If I saw that being done, who's to say that it's not being done everywhere? And that could be one of the reasons why we may have major pest control problems, because the pest control isn't being done right. And also, they're being allowed into apartments by themselves. the staff member is not going in with them to make sure that number one, that they're doing their job, and number two, that they're not doing anything they shouldn't be doing. Not saying that they do, but my understanding is that the staff member that opens the door is supposed to be inside the apartment when they're in there. So those are just two little items that I don't know if they could be helping elsewhere. The security random patrols, I know that they do them, but a lot of times I've seen that they just drive up, they sit in their car, they're either on their computers or whatever, they're not really looking around, checking. I know at my property we've had a couple of car break-ins in the last couple of weeks, so just want to make sure that they're being vigilant in their patrols and really checking for things that could be happening.
Absolutely, Commissioner. We'll go ahead and take your feedback. We'll work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor, if you'll read us into, or we have some more?
From the last one, so.
So during the tour at Lincoln, there were questions asked about partners who are currently occupying some of our offline unit spaces. So previously we had leases that while there was a contract rent, there was a provision for services in lieu of rent, and so a couple of commissioners asked about that, so we're going to go ahead and address that in this presentation. And again, this is Assistant Director Viviana Rivera.
Hi, thank you. So I'm just going to briefly kind of go over our partnership history. So what we're trying to do right now is address our partnerships, right? So we're talking to our current partners that have actually hold leases at our properties to just try to address maybe some of the disconnect or some of the issues that we've had, maybe not had as much engagement with them in recent years. So we're trying to try to create a strategy for how to engage our partnerships. As Richard talked about the school systems and all of that, and one of the commissioners was talking about how we're working with schools to bring information to the families, and this kind of ties it all in together. So what we're trying to do is find creative and innovative ways to bring our partners to our communities, right? And in order to do that, first we need to talk to the ones that we currently have and address any issues that we have, whether it's reporting, whether it's just communication, are they providing the services that they say that they are, and then from there what we're trying to build is a system where we streamline our services to our residents directly. We talked about transportation issues. What we do is we coordinate services, and what we want to do is we want to bring the services to our families, and we want to bring services that are actually meaningful and impactful to the partners that we work with. To the residents. So these are just a couple of the organizations that we partner with. Urban Faith is one that we have at Lincoln Heights, and I recently spoke with them, and what came from the conversation was just that they were not providing services. The pandemic did cause some disruption in their funding, and so they were not able to provide services, and we decided to discontinue our lease agreement and move into an MOU where they would provide just a certain amount of services throughout the year. So just kind of re-engaging the partner, but maybe at a different level. We also have our Ethnos partner, and this is another one where, again, we just had a conversation, very candid conversation about what they're able to do for us, and we decided that in this particular situation, they no longer were providing services that our residents needed, and we decided to part ways. The next one is our Miller Child Development Center, which is a daycare center. Now this one is they do not do services in lieu of rent. They actually continue to pay rent. They've been a partner of ours for a very, very long time, and they're going to continue to be a partner. What we're going to do here is actually have them just give us a little bit more information about the residents that they are serving that are our residents. So again, it's just kind of revisiting the scope of work.
Do we I'm going to interrupt you for 2 seconds.
Sure.
Do we get resident surveys, satisfaction surveys?
So we have in the past, and that's one of the things that we're going to re-engage and kind of do a little bit more. We're going to get more resident feedback from several different places. One is our PCC, which is our where we have our excuse me, I think I'm losing my voice. We have our partners who get together a couple of times a year, and they discuss, what needs they see in the community. Residents are part of that conversation. We also have our resident council, and we do get their feedback as well from the residents at that point. And we do surveys. We're going to start doing more surveys about the current services they're receiving, and also what they want to see at their communities. Because one of the things that we're that's very important to us in our department is not only bringing services to the properties, but bringing services that the residents are asking for, that they need, and partners that are actually delivering those services. So that's kind of that's our vision, is to just really bring it all together by making it meaningful and impactful for our residents. So.
So the PCC is the Program Coordinating Committee. As part of our Family Self-Sufficiency Program, HUD regulations require that we have a collaborative Program Coordinating Committee. Right. And so in the past, we've used it specifically for the FSS program to check off the box, but now we've expanded to include all of our service programs. And so we're really trying to create a legitimate collaborative in our own right to bring in feedback from not only partners, but also residents. The regulations require that we have residents as part of the Program Coordinating Committee. So just to provide clarity on the PCC.
Thank you. And we just had our recent PCC meeting. I think we had something like, I think maybe about 13 community partners attend. So there's a lot of engagement on behalf of our partners that really want to re-engage with us and provide services. So what we're trying to, and again, this is just kind of talking about the resident council, the PCC resident surveys. The University of Incarnate Word is another partner that we work with, that they are doing their own surveys that they provide the information to us from their surveys. And then when we renew our ROS grant, which is ROS is one of our programs that we provide, we have to do a resident survey for all of those residents before we can reapply for that grant. And our long-term goal, again, is to bring services on site to engage residents and to meet their needs, and again, to build, positive communities. What we do plan to do is to launch a assessment of our partners, which will include a quarterly on-site assessment of all of our partners as we build those partnerships, and then do an annual reassessment to determine if the partnership should continue, if it needs to be adjusted, changed, or if it needs to be terminated, just depending on the needs of the community. By then, we hope to have gotten enough survey feedback on that particular service provider. But okay. In a nutshell, this is all kind of really preliminary. We've drafted a process that I don't think was added to your packet, so I apologize for that. But let's see, maybe it has. No, it was not, but I will provide that to you all because we do have an draft outline of what that's going to look like. And this is for all of our public housing properties, so families, senior, disabled, all of them. Mm-hmm.
As we provide space for these particular programs, some of them obviously not effective or unable to fulfill what they've said they'd be doing. Are we exploring other partnerships? I mean, specifically, I think because we've been approached by the city in their, and I wish I could think of the gentleman's name at this point, but it's through their, it's not Move to Work, but it's their say it again?
Ready to Work?
Ready to Work, yeah.
We're a partner.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We applied as an unfunded partner with Workforce Solutions.
Okay, because I was going to say specifically, they were asking for, they said, do y'all have space? I'm like,
yes.
Yeah, we've had several Ready to Work partners reach out to us.
All right, okay.
We have a really long list of partners that are ready to work with us, but we are we're very serious about the vetting process and making sure that I know that one of the commissioners mentioned the whole like knocking door to door, right? We want to be sure that the partners that are coming to our properties are partners that are approved, through our department, either through an MOU or just a partnership or agreement. So for that to happen, it's all happening right now. We have our resident engagement manager
Right.
of resident services. She's taking care of all of those MOUs, but we are partners with all of these. It's just kind of bringing those services on site does require some kind of contract and a data sharing agreement, which is a little bit more robust than just kind of having them come and provide services every now and again. So this is more of like that regular, coming by on.
I'll just say, I know Commissioner Contreras did.
I know.
She had to leave, but she is specific about this, so she'll probably have follow-up questions for you guys.
Yeah, and
So.
We have met with her, and I have plenty of information to provide.
Okay.
Thank you, Vidi.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Counselor, if you'll read us in the closed session.
Yes, sir. The board will be meeting in closed session to consult with its attorney and discuss properties overseen by asset management under sections 551.072 and 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. The time is 3:39.
Oh, let's go.
Meeting is now adjourned at 4:33 p.m.